It was a peaceful day on the planet, a small colony hidden on the edge of human space. The sun shone brightly over the small town, casting warm rays over the children playing in the streets. Laughter filled the air as they ran, their small feet kicking up dust, unaware of the danger that loomed just beyond their world. The humans had no idea that, in the vast reaches of space, their fate had already been sealed. The aliens had watched them for weeks, studying the humans from the shadows, quietly observing. They had seen enough to believe that the humans were weak, nothing more than another primitive species in the galaxy. They had seen the humans' technology, their cities, and their way of life. But what they failed to understand was the one thing that made humans different from any other species: the children. It was the children who held the secret, the children who would change everything. The aliens had underestimated the humans. They believed that by capturing a few human children, they could use them as leverage against the human colonies. They thought they would be able to control the humans through fear. What they didn't know was that they had just signed their own death warrant. The moment they landed, the peace of the small colony was shattered. Ships descended from the sky, their engines roaring as they cut through the atmosphere. Panic spread through the streets. The children froze, their innocent faces filled with confusion and fear. But it was too late. The invaders were already here. The alien forces moved quickly, using their superior technology to overpower the colony's defenses. No one had expected an attack so fast, so brutal. The soldiers were highly trained, their weapons more advanced than anything the humans had. In a matter of minutes, they had overrun the entire town. The children, scared and confused, were taken. They were grabbed from their homes, pulled away from their families, and loaded onto the alien ships. Their cries echoed in the streets, but no one could stop the invaders. The alien leader, a tall, cold being known only as Korath, watched with a sense of triumph. He had made the decision to take the children, and now the humans would have no choice but to bow to his will. He believed the children would be nothing more than pawns in his game. He was wrong. As the last of the children were loaded onto the ships, Korath turned to his second-in-command, an alien named Sarak. "Prepare for the journey," Korath ordered. "We will deliver the humans a message they will never forget." But Sarak hesitated, his antennae twitching with unease. "Leader," he said carefully, "are we certain about this? The humans, they may retaliate." Korath sneered. "Retaliate? They're nothing compared to us. We have their children. What can they possibly do?" He motioned for Sarak to follow him as he made his way toward the command deck. "They'll bend the knee to us, just as every other species has." The ship's engines roared to life as the craft lifted off, leaving the small colony far behind. Korath stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes scanning the stars ahead. He felt a sense of satisfaction, but deep down, there was something else, a nagging feeling he couldn't shake. He had heard rumors of humanity's fierce spirit, of their ability to fight back in the face of impossible odds. But those were just stories. No one had ever seen it in action. "Proceed to the outer rim," Korath ordered. "We'll take the children to the farthest reaches of space. No one will be able to stop us." But as the ship sailed deeper into the unknown, something unexpected happened. One of the children, a girl no older than 7, began to glow. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a faint shimmer around her. But soon, the glow grew brighter. It spread across the room, illuminating everything in its path. The other children began to shift nervously, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What is happening?" Sarak whispered, eyes fixed on the girl. His voice trembled with a mixture of awe and fear. Korath turned sharply, his cold eyes narrowing. "It's nothing. The humans are weak. This is just some sort of trick, a defense mechanism. They're nothing to worry about." But even as he spoke, a chill ran down his spine. There was something about this girl, something he couldn't explain. The energy in the room was shifting, changing. It felt as though the air itself was alive. Korath tried to shake off the unease, but the nagging feeling only grew stronger. As the ship sped through the stars, the alien leader couldn't shake the thought that perhaps they had made a grave mistake. The humans may have been weaker than the rest of the galaxy, but they weren't helpless. Not at all. And now, the aliens had done something they would soon regret. They had taken the one thing that could destroy them. As the ship hurtled deeper into the galaxy, the aliens remained unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing within the hearts of their prisoners. The children, terrified and confused, huddled together, but there was something more about them. A force, an energy, a connection that had long been dormant in the human race. Korath stood at the front of the command deck, his sharp alien features lit by the faint glow of the navigational lights. His mind replayed his previous thoughts. The humans are weak. They won't retaliate. Their children are no different. I have everything under control. But the nagging unease wouldn't leave him. The strange glow from earlier still echoed in his mind, refusing to be ignored. The girl, the one who had glowed like some celestial force. His mind raced. Could it have been a fluke? Or was there something more to it? Could humans possess powers the galaxy wasn't aware of? He turned to Sarek, his second in command. "Did you see what happened to the girl?" he asked sharply. Sarek shifted uncomfortably, his four antennae twitching in uncertainty. "Yes, leader, I saw it. But it can't be possible. Humans, they are just simple creatures." Korath's eyes narrowed. "Simple? I studied their species for years, Sarek. They are nothing like the others we've encountered. But if they have hidden potential, it would explain this." He gestured to the small crew of alien soldiers watching the captured children. "I've seen this kind of power before in the ancient texts. It's called the Awakening." Sarek's eyes widened in shock. The Awakening? But those were just legends. Legends or not, I'm not willing to take chances, Korath snapped. "We must find out what's going on before it's too late." The girl, who had started the strange glow, was sitting quietly among the others. Her wide, innocent eyes darted around nervously. She could feel it too. Something was happening. Something deep within her. She didn't understand it, but she knew that she wasn't afraid anymore. There was power within her. It surged like a wave, rising from deep inside her chest, spreading through every fiber of her being. She glanced at the other children. They were scared, their faces pale with fear. But then she felt it. A connection, a thread that linked them all together. She could feel their energy, their emotions, even their fears, and they were all feeling the same thing. Something's wrong. We are not alone. As the ship sped further into the depths of space, the strange energy around the children began to grow. It spread out of them, forming a faint, shimmering aura that no one, not even the aliens, could see. But they could feel it. The air inside the ship grew thick. It wasn't the usual hum of machinery or the quiet whispers of the crew. No, it was something else, something more. Korath took a step back, his sharp gaze scanning the children. The power was growing, building, but he could not pinpoint its source. The girl, the one who had glowed, remained still, her eyes closed as though she was in deep concentration. Sarek, who had been watching her intently, suddenly spoke up, his voice filled with alarm. "Leader, we must act. If they awaken, we might not be able to contain them. These humans, they may not be as weak as we thought." Korath turned his gaze toward Sarek, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Contain them? If it's what I think it is, we'll be their downfall. Their strength is their greatest weakness." He chuckled softly to himself. "They will learn quickly that messing with us was a mistake. We are the most advanced species in the galaxy." But Korath could feel the uneasy tension building. There was something more in the air now, something he couldn't ignore. The faintest pulse of power rippled through the ship. And then, it happened. Without warning, the lights on the ship flickered. The hum of the engines grew louder, almost deafening. The children's energy, once subtle, began to flare, each one glowing with an intense light. It was the girl again. She was the center of it all. The others were feeding off her power, amplifying it in ways that Korath couldn't comprehend. Korath barked orders to the crew, but his voice faltered when the ship's sensors began to malfunction. What's going on? The crew scrambled, but the ship's systems were failing. The once controlled environment was now a whirlwind of static and chaos. The children were not just connected, they were united. They were harnessing something ancient, something that no one had expected. A loud, echoing boom shook the ship, sending tremors through its structure. The children's eyes were all open now, their gazes locking onto the alien soldiers. The power was undeniable. Korath's heart raced. He had made a grave mistake. What he had thought was weakness had been the opposite all along. Serac took a step back, his face pale. "Leader, we need to stop them now. If this continues, we will lose everything." Korath shook his head, his mind reeling. It's too late for that. The children were not just innocent captives anymore. They were something far more dangerous. And now, Korath and his entire crew were facing the consequences of their arrogance. The ship trembled again, more violently this time, as the power within the children surged. The once steady hum of the ship's engines now reverberated like a deep, foreboding growl. Lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows across the cold, metallic walls. Every crew member, from the officers on the command deck to the soldiers guarding the children, felt it, a sense of impending doom, something far more dangerous than any weapon or force they had ever faced. Korath stood at the center of the command room, his eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him, which was glitching in and out. The ship's systems were spiraling into chaos. Every attempt to override the malfunctioning controls failed. There was no escape from this madness. Why is this happening? Korath muttered to himself, trying to regain control of the situation. The children, especially the girl, had become a nexus of unimaginable power. Their very presence was enough to throw the ship into disarray. Serac, his second in command, stood nearby, his insectoid features twitching nervously. He watched as the crew scrambled to make sense of the overwhelming feedback from the ship's systems. "Leader, we can no longer ignore it," he said, his voice shaky. "They are awakening something in us, something we were not prepared for." Korath clenched his fists in frustration. "We underestimated them, Serac. But we can't let this continue. These humans, they're no ordinary species. Their power is not just physical. It's something else. We need to do something before we lose everything." The girl, who had remained eerily calm up until now, suddenly opened her eyes. The pale blue glow that had once flickered in her pupils was now a steady, blinding light. She gazed at the soldiers in the room, unblinking, almost as if she could see through them. The room fell into a dead silence. The soldiers, though highly trained and armed, felt the weight of her gaze settle on them like an invisible force, causing them to shift uncomfortably. One soldier, unable to handle the growing pressure, spoke up, his voice strained with fear. They're not human. They can't be." Another soldier shook his head in disbelief, his hand tightening around his weapon. "This is unnatural. We should never have taken them. We were warned." The girl's voice, soft yet commanding, cut through the tense silence. "You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have taken us." Her voice was calm, almost soothing, yet every word carried an unspoken threat. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to make of her words. Her calmness was unnerving, as if she knew something they didn't, as if she had seen beyond the immediate danger and was now focused on something much bigger. And then it happened. A sudden blast of energy erupted from the children, a concentrated burst of raw power that shook the entire ship. The alien soldiers and crew were thrown back against the walls, the force of the impact knocking them unconscious. But the children remained standing, unaffected, their faces serene as if they had expected it all along. Korath gripped the edge of the console, steadying himself as he watched in shock. "This power," he whispered, his voice filled with dread. It's not just the children. It's them. It's all of them working together. The ship's lights dimmed again, the interior becoming bathed in an eerie darkness. The glow from the children's bodies pulsed in the shadows, casting an almost otherworldly light. Korath could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The ship's energy wasn't just fluctuating anymore, it was being manipulated. He turned to Sarek, his voice filled with fear. We've awakened something we can't control. We've made a terrible mistake. Sarek's antennae twitched nervously. Leader, we need to return to the station. We need to alert the others. This isn't just about the children anymore. It's about something we have no understanding of. We can't take any more chances. But Korath wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on the girl once again. She had stepped forward, her tiny hands raised, and the glow around her seemed to pulse with an increasing intensity. The other children, once meek and terrified, now stood with a newfound strength, their eyes burning with the same otherworldly energy. Korath's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The girl wasn't just a vessel of power. She was the key. She was the one that could bring an end to everything they had worked for. The other children were simply extensions of her energy, and he had made the fatal mistake of underestimating her. Before Korath could give any orders, the girl spoke again, her voice unwavering. You have no idea what you've done. This ship, this crew, it's all part of something bigger. You've awakened us. Now we awaken the Earth. Korath's eyes widened in terror as the realization hit him like a physical blow. The children weren't just a threat to the aliens. They were a threat to the entire galaxy. And Earth, a planet the universe had long considered insignificant, had been hiding something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The ship's shaking intensified. The walls of the command deck cracked, and a low hum filled the air, a hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The power inside the children was no longer a gentle glow. It had grown into a force beyond comprehension. Prepare for the consequences, the girl said one final time, her voice echoing throughout the ship. Korath's last thought before the world around him went dark was a simple truth. The human children weren't just powerful. They were unstoppable. The ship was no longer the cold, mechanical fortress it once was. It now felt alive, breathing with the power of the children who had slowly taken control. The once pristine halls were cracked, the walls reverberating with energy, as though they were holding their breath. The air itself felt thick, charged with a growing force. Korath struggled to push himself back to his feet, his head spinning from the blast that had nearly incapacitated him. His crew members were in a similar state, dazed and disoriented, trying to regain their senses. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The children had unleashed something far greater than they could have ever predicted. Sarek, who had remained by Korath's side, looked up at the control panel, which flickered erratically. Leader, it's not just the children. It's the entire ship. The systems are being overridden. He glanced at Korath, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. This ship is no longer responding to us. It's responding to them. Korath looked toward the children, who were standing at the center of the room. Their faces were calm, their expressions devoid of fear or malice, but their eyes, those eyes, glowed with an intensity that seemed to pierce through him. It was as though they were looking into his very soul, seeing the depth of his failure. And he felt a cold chill run through his bones. The girl, the one who had stood as the leader among them, was no longer the fragile, innocent child they had captured. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering, as if she had already seen the outcome of this encounter and was merely waiting for the inevitable. Why are you doing this? Korath's voice trembled, but he forced himself to stand straight. You were our prisoners. You were helpless. Why turn against us? The girl's lips parted, but it was not just her voice that spoke. The words echoed as if coming from every corner of the room, reverberating through the very walls of the ship. We were never helpless. You just failed to see it. And now you will witness the power of Earth." The last word echoed with a finality that sent a shockwave through the room. Korath staggered backward, his mind racing. Earth. What did Earth have to do with any of this? The planet was nothing more than a speck in the universe, a primitive, undeveloped world. The aliens had no reason to fear it, no reason to even consider it. But the children were now a manifestation of something far older, far more powerful than any alien race had ever known. They were not merely humans. They were something different, something forgotten by the galaxy, something that was now waking up. "You do not understand the consequences of what you've done," the girl said softly, her tone growing darker, more ominous. "We are the harbingers of Earth's reckoning. The powers you fear, the forces you cannot comprehend, they are already in motion." Sarek took a step back, his insectoid antennae twitching as he stared at the girl, the others, and the strange energy that now filled the room. He could feel it too, the weight of something ancient, something buried beneath centuries of cosmic dust, slowly awakening. "We've made a grave mistake, Korath," Sarek whispered, almost to himself. "These children, they are not the weak creatures we believe them to be. They are the key to something far greater. They are more than just human. They are the beginning of the end." The words were like a knife to Korath's heart. He had long suspected that something about this mission felt wrong, but he had pushed those feelings aside in pursuit of his goals. Now, as the ship groaned and shifted around them, he realized the true scope of their failure. As the girl extended her hand toward him, a soft but chilling energy rippled outward. The lights in the room flared, and for a moment, Korath could have sworn he saw visions, images of Earth, images of its people. But they were not the humans he knew. These were ancient, long-forgotten figures, their faces stern and powerful, their eyes burning with the same energy the children now wielded. "It's already begun," the girl said, her voice echoing one final time. "Your fate is sealed, and with it, the fate of your entire species." Before Korath could respond, the ship's alarms blared once again, signaling the collapse of their systems. The walls around them began to buckle and warp as the energy from the children spread across the entire ship. Nothing could withstand it. The ship was falling apart, and there was nothing left to do but wait. The crew scrambled to reach the escape pods, but it was too late. The children had already seized control. Korath's mind raced as he tried to formulate a plan, but the power emanating from the girl and the others made it impossible to think clearly. Korath could feel it in his bones. The end was coming, and Earth, that insignificant little planet, was about to awaken a power that no one could stop. Korath's pulse quickened as the ship shook once again, this time with an intensity that sent him stumbling. The control panels flickered erratically, sparking and crackling in a way that suggested the very foundation of the ship was beginning to crumble. The children, their eyes glowing faintly, stood at the heart of it all, seemingly unaffected by the chaos around them. They were calm, eerily so, as if they had anticipated this moment for a long time. Korath had seen many things in his lifetime: wars, destruction, and the aftermath of countless conquests. But never had he felt such a pervasive, suffocating sense of dread. The air was thick with something he couldn't describe, like the ship itself was alive and conscious, reacting to the children and their newfound power. "They're doing this," Sarek muttered under his breath. His antennae twitched nervously, and his alien features twisted in horror. "They've completely taken control of the ship." Korath didn't need to look at him to know the gravity of the situation. The children were no longer the helpless prisoners they once seemed. They had become something else, something more powerful, more dangerous. And now, it was clear they had a purpose far greater than just escaping their captors. They were orchestrating something, and it wasn't going to end well. "Why?" Korath shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "Why are you doing this?" The girl, the one who had spoken with such authority, turned her gaze to him. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she lifted her hand, and the ship shuddered once again. The very walls groaned in protest, as though they were stretching and warping under an immense weight. The lights flickered before going out completely, leaving them in complete darkness, save for the faint glow of the children's eyes. When the lights returned, Korath felt a chill run down his spine. The room had changed. The atmosphere was thick with an energy he could neither understand nor control. It was as if time itself had slowed, and every breath felt heavy, laden with the weight of something ancient. "We were born to protect the earth." The girl's voice was soft, but it carried a deep resonance, like a whisper that echoed through every corner of the ship. "And now we have awakened. This ship is merely the beginning. You will witness what happens when the Earth's children are aroused." Korath felt a sudden, unexplainable sensation in his chest. A tightness, a warning. It was as if the very universe was holding its breath. He took a step back, but the girl's gaze held him in place. It was like an invisible force pinning him to the ground, an overwhelming sense of power emanating from her. The girl's lips parted again, and the ship responded. The walls shifted. The corridors began to warp and stretch as if they were being manipulated by an unseen hand. Korath could hear the ship's systems crying out in agony, the sound of metal bending and twisting under unimaginable strain. "This ship, this station, it's just the first of many," the girl continued, her voice growing more commanding, more resonant. "The Earth's defenses have always been hidden, locked away beneath the surface of the planet. But now, you've awakened us, and you will witness the strength of a force you cannot defeat." Korath felt the blood drain from his face. He was no longer looking at a group of innocent children. What he saw before him now were agents of something far more ancient, far more powerful. They were the emissaries of Earth's wrath, and the consequences of their awakening were beyond anything his mind could grasp. Sarek turned to Korath, his face pale. "We have to leave," he said, his voice shaking. "This is no longer about capturing children or making a profit. This is something beyond us. We can't fight this." Korath knew Sarek was right. The feeling of inevitability, of impending doom, washed over him like a tide. There was no escape. The children were the key, and they were unlocking a force that could not be contained. As Korath watched helplessly, the ship seemed to tear itself apart. The walls buckled, and the floor beneath them cracked open, revealing a strange, glowing energy beneath the surface. It was as if the ship was no longer a vessel but a living, breathing thing, one that was growing and evolving at a terrifying rate. The girl raised her hand again, and this time, the energy coursed through the ship with such intensity that Korath could feel it vibrating in his bones. The air became thick, and a sound, an otherworldly hum, began to reverberate through the walls. "It's too late now," the girl said quietly, her eyes locking onto Korath's. "The Earth's warriors are waking, and they will reclaim what is theirs." Before Korath could respond, the room was filled with a blinding light. The ship groaned one last time, and then, with a deafening crack, it vanished from existence, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of a forgotten planet's wrath. Korath's vision blurred as the last remnants of the ship's interior dissolved into nothingness. He was no longer sure whether he was still standing or floating in space. The sound of his breath was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Then, all at once, his feet slammed back onto solid ground, and he felt the oppressive weight of the situation pressing down on him. His body ached as if it had been stretched to its limit, but he had no time to recover. The space around him had shifted. He could see the stars and distant planets scattered across the void, but something was different now. There was a pulsating energy in the air, an electric hum that seemed to vibrate through every inch of his body. It was as if the very fabric of the universe had been disturbed by the force that the children had unleashed. The girl stood in front of him, her small frame glowing with an unnatural light. Her eyes shone with a power that made Korath's blood run cold. This was no longer the helpless child they had captured. This was something far more terrifying. "You should never have come." The girl's voice was soft, but her words carried an undeniable weight. The Earth's warriors are not to be trifled with. You have sealed your fate, and now the consequences are irreversible. Korath's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what was happening. The ship, the station, had been completely disintegrated in the blink of an eye. It was gone, reduced to nothing more than particles in the vastness of space, and with it, any hope of escaping or fighting back. Around him, the air shimmered with strange energy, and the vast expanse of space seemed to warp, as though it were bending to the will of the children. Korath's heart skipped a beat when he saw what was happening next. Out of nowhere, a massive figure began to materialize in front of them. It was a colossal being, its form shifting like smoke, yet undeniably solid. It towered over them, its eyes burning with an ancient, unrelenting fury. Korath's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like it. "This is what you've awakened," the girl spoke again, but this time, her voice was different. It was deeper, more commanding, as if it was being carried by the immense power that was now surrounding them. "The first of many. The Earth's warriors are not like anything you've ever faced. They are not bound by your laws. They are not bound by your rules." Korath took a step back, his legs trembling. He had known that something powerful was tied to Earth's children, but this was beyond comprehension. He had no idea how they had done it or what exactly they had released, but he knew one thing for sure: there was no way to fight back. The giant figure stretched out its enormous arm, and Korath instinctively raised his hands in defense. But there was no use. The figure's power was beyond anything Korath had ever encountered. With a single motion, the being effortlessly crushed the air around them, sending a shockwave through space that shook Korath to his core. "I warned you," the girl said, her voice now tinged with sadness, as if she pitied them. "You've awakened forces you can't comprehend. The warriors of Earth will show no mercy." Korath struggled to stay on his feet as the immense being advanced, its every movement sending ripples through the very fabric of space. Its eyes, burning like twin suns, focused on him with a gaze that could have melted him where he stood. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the giant being paused. Its gaze flickered, almost as if it was listening to something that only it could hear. Korath's heart raced in his chest. What was happening now? The girl, still glowing with that eerie light, stepped forward. She extended her hand, and Korath felt the air grow colder, sharper. The figure before them seemed to be waiting for her command. "Not yet," she said softly, her words carrying an almost reverent tone. "The warriors are ready, but we need to give them time. Time to fully awaken." Korath's stomach churned. Time to fully awaken. What could be worse than this? The ground beneath them trembled as the girl's words hung in the air. The energy surrounding them intensified, and Korath's skin felt as though it was being burned by the very air itself. He could barely think, the pressure overwhelming him. The force that had been unleashed was like nothing he had ever imagined. Sarek, still in shock, whispered in a terrified voice, "What? What are they going to do?" "They're going to take us to Earth," the girl replied. "To face what we have become. To face what you have awoken." Korath's thoughts flashed back to the warnings they had heard, about Earth's warriors, about the children they had captured. But now it was too late. The children had become something far greater than they had ever been, and whatever lay ahead, it was clear that it would not be kind. Before Korath could respond, the world around him shattered once again. The air rippled like water, and the stars stretched and twisted into impossible shapes. Everything was collapsing into a singular point, toward Earth. And with it, Korath realized, they were being drawn toward their doom. The darkness of space faded around Korath and his team as they were pulled toward Earth. A deep, cold silence settled in the void, broken only by the sharp hum of the unnatural energy that surrounded them. The planet loomed ahead, larger than it had ever seemed before, as if it were a final destination from which there was no escape. Korath's mind raced as they plunged deeper into the pull of Earth's gravity. Every thought, every decision that had led them here, seemed like a distant memory. The girl, now standing calmly in front of him, her glowing form still radiating with power, had not said another word. She simply watched as the terrifying reality unfolded before them. The massive being, the giant that had materialized in front of them earlier, now stood behind them, its enormous presence a constant, oppressive weight. It did not move, but its eyes, glowing with an ancient fire, were locked on the horizon that led to Earth. "Do you understand now?" The girl's voice cut through the silence, calm and eerie. "Do you understand the magnitude of your mistake?" Korath couldn't respond. His breath felt trapped in his lungs. The air was thin, and every passing second made him feel as though he were suffocating. He wasn't sure whether it was the oppressive atmosphere or the sheer dread of what was to come, but he knew one thing. Whatever was coming next, it was going to be unlike anything they had ever faced before. "We never meant for this," Sarek muttered, barely audible over the hum of the energy. "We only wanted to know, just a glimpse of their power." The girl's eyes flicked toward him. "Power? You have no idea what power truly is. You only wanted to steal from Earth's children, and in doing so, you awakened what should never have been disturbed." The ship continued its descent toward the surface, now only moments away from Earth's atmosphere. Korath could feel the temperature rising as the ship began to burn from the friction. But it wasn't the heat that consumed his thoughts. It was the overwhelming sense of doom that had taken hold of him, as if the very essence of Earth had swallowed them whole. As they approached the surface, a deep rumble shook the ship. It wasn't an ordinary quake. It was a force, a resonance that seemed to reverberate through the fabric of space itself. Something was happening below them. The girl stepped forward, her eyes glowing brighter, her aura pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is where it begins," she whispered. "This is where you will meet the warriors, the ones who've been waiting, the ones who guard the secrets of Earth. They are no longer bound by time, no longer bound by anything." Korath's eyes widened as a flash of light erupted from the planet below. It wasn't just light. It was energy, raw and unfathomable, like the very essence of Earth itself had awakened. The force was so powerful, it sent shockwaves through their ship, causing it to rattle and groan. The girl raised her hand, and in an instant, the shockwaves ceased. The energy suspended itself in midair, as if frozen by an invisible hand. "You are about to meet them," she said, her voice no longer filled with malice, but something else, something darker, something inevitable. "The Earth's children have called forth the warriors. You cannot escape what is about to come." Before Korath could fully process what she meant, the ship jolted violently. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, everything went black. When the lights returned, they were no longer aboard the ship. The harsh winds of Earth's atmosphere whipped at their faces, and the ground beneath their feet was solid, cold, hard, and unyielding. They were standing on Earth's surface, surrounded by ancient structures that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. It was like they had stepped into another time, another world entirely. And then, from the shadows, they appeared. The warriors. Tall, clad in strange armor that shimmered with an iridescent glow, their faces hidden behind helmets that resembled skulls. Their presence was suffocating, like the air itself had become thick with their power. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They only watched. Korath could feel his heart racing in his chest. These beings were not like anything he had ever encountered before. They weren't just powerful. They were ancient, eternal, and far beyond anything he could have imagined. The girl stood beside them, her expression cold, yet strangely triumphant. "You have come to the one place where no outsider is welcome. The warriors of Earth do not bow to anyone. They do not negotiate, and they do not show mercy." Korath tried to steady himself, his mind reeling. He had faced countless dangers, but this was something different. This was no longer a fight. It was a reckoning, a final judgment. The warriors stepped forward, their movements precise, calculated, and silent. Their eyes locked on Korath and his team. And in that moment, Korath knew that they were out of time. There was no escape, no way to run. "You came here," the girl said, her voice soft but filled with finality. "And now you will face the consequences." With that, the warriors raised their weapons, and Korath knew that Earth's wrath had arrived. The battle for survival had begun.